that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello. Make sure the Shrike does not capture you. Welcome to a sci-fi classic with the late 80s, I think, novel by Dan Simmons, Hyperion. If you've ever read the Canterbury Tales, then you kind of know the format. If you have not, basically, we are in the far future. There are 7 pilgrims on a journey to visit this planet, Hyperion. None of them know exactly why they are on their trip, so they each decide to tell each other their tales. And so we relatively get 7 different short stories with little interludes in between, which are present day. And it is basically the entirety of the book. All different people with their different perspectives on what is happening, or what happened in their lives to get to where they are now. If you want a satisfying ending, I'll let you know from the get-go, the book just kind of ends abruptly. But it was more about the journey than the destination. So long as you look at it like that, I think you'll be okay. Of course, if you want more, you can read The Fall of Hyperion, which could be considered part 2 of this story, particularly. There's a book 3 and 4, but they're a bit more separate from this particular story. Fall of Hyperion is the closest actual sequel to this. But yeah, there is this mysterious being known as the Shrike. Pure red eyes, sharp body on that planet. And people worship it. But humanity is gone all across the stars now. I think the world is really interesting. We got tree ships, that's really fun. Everything down to the religious symbolism and critiquing and conversations that are had in this story. This is a story that has something to say. It is not just there to entertain, it has a point. But it is also not there to preach to you, per se. More so just to have a dialogue with you, in a sense. And I think that's really well done, how it's handled with all of that. I'd say one of my favorites was the first one of the priests, the poets, and the scholar. Were probably my favorite stories of the bunch. There's also a soldier, a detective, and a console guy. Their stories are fine, but nothing to really write home about, in my opinion. But I do think this is absolutely... If you are a fan of sci-fi, this is something you need to read before you die. Even if you never pick up any of the other books in this series, you should read this one. Another wonderful thing that Dan Simmons does is, depending on the perspective, you kind of get a different way of writing and style. So the way that the poet short story goes is not the same as how the scholar goes, or how the priest goes. The priest is more kind of mysterious, kind of horror-esque. The poet has serious stuff going on, but I definitely would call that more of a comedy. I would say that the scholar is more of a tragedy. And then with the detective, we get back to a mystery, but it's less of a horror, unknown mystery, more of a, detective thriller, And then, oddly enough, the soldier story is more of a love story. Sorta, kind of. But by and large, I really, really, really love this story, and I think you will really enjoy it if you give it a chance. It's definitely not for everybody. I've seen people online trash this book. It really depends on what you're looking for, but if this is what you're looking for, then it's going to be something you're really, really looking for. And it will satisfy an itch, I'll tell you that much. But I recommend it a whole lot. I hope you check it out. I'm gonna get into some spoilers if you don't want that. Time to go. We have Colonel Kadan Kessep, Father Hoyt, poet Martin Selenis, Brown Lamia, a detective, Sol Wintub, who's a scholar, has an infant baby, daughter Rachel. Hetmistine. There's fun conversations between Shrike worship, or atheist, or Catholic, or Jew. They all decide to tell their stories. We start with Hoyt's. And it's not even really Hoyt's story. He basically has these journals of a guy named Father Durr, who's been missing for 4 years. Durr's journal is in the 27th century, and the main plot that we're following is after that. So, we're in the 21st century. So just to give you some perspective. Unlike iRobot, which I've read previously, which is more, it's kind of hard to get invested in the story when a lot of those future dates now are just the present. It happens when you read a work that's old enough. But luckily, Dan Simmons, who wrote this in the late 80s, decided, I'm just going to push this super far. Eventually, this will become modern day for someone, but long after we're all dead. Seeing as how there are people in the 80s still alive now, I think that was a smart choice. I don't know if this is important for later books, but I thought I would mention continents on Hyperion are Equus, Aquila, and Ursa. Durr wishes to find evidence of ancient civilizations on the planet Hyperion that worshipped Christ. I forgot to mention that Father Durr is in exile, because Father Durr and his faith tried to tamper with evidence to make his appeal to God stronger. And when they found that out, he was cast out. So now he's looking for earnest evidence of Christ proof on other worlds. But his faith is waning. As he makes it to the planet in one of the more, touristy spots, a man is shot in front of him. And all I can think of is there has to be more to life than this. But even though he doesn't even believe, he's struggling with his faith at all, he sits down with him and prays over his soul or whatever. He eventually reaches these people who, this might be triggering for some people if you have family, or you are. There are these beings that are genderless, are bald, they kind of have facial features reminiscent of people with Down syndrome, and they worship this thing called the cruciform. Now, I only say offended because it's implied that it is not what you should be, because they've been warped by something, which I think can be a bit rough to read, especially if you have people that you know that are, or you are. That being said, it's not even really about them, it's more so the mystery of how they came to be and why are they there. So I think that still works. But as Durr is staying there, he's starting to vomit some black bile. They call them the Bakorans, which are short people that follow the cruciform. I think the Bakorans is really funny because, as you might not know, I'm a fan of the Star Wars Expanded Universe, which existed from 1977 as soon as the films came, actually a little bit before the films came out, to 2014. But there's a book written by Kathy Tyers, which takes place one day after Return of the Jedi, called Truce at Bakora. So I just think it's really funny that we have characters here that are Bakorans. The Bakorans in Star Wars are a lot different, but the cruciform, what they worship, is this big glass structure, which is shaped in a cross. And again, what this story, I think, out of all of them, does phenomenal well is more of that sort of H.P. Lovecraft, sort of this unknown thing about it, this mystery. But part of what works about the Lovecraft works is most of the people in the stories are like scholars and stuff, right? And I think people misconstrue the fear of the unknown is not fear of stuff you don't know. It's in those stories, it is always learning more because it's part of human nature to want to understand and being better off not knowing as you learn more. And you very much get that vibe with this. At some point, Dur has an encounter with the Shrike, but the Shrike does not kill him, so they believe him to be part of the Cruciform. What we also learn about these beings that are sexless is that they cannot die. If you kill them, they will simply come back to life. And part of that, too, is why they say these things called true death, where if they kill someone and they don't come back, then that is they have the true death, whereas they don't. They are part of the Cruciform. They don't die. We later learn that after all this went down, and they found out about Father Dur, they would go on to nuke the Bakorans, or what was left of them. But it ends rather awful. I mean, he seemingly can't die either. So he basically has to be agonized on this tree for a long, long time. Yeah, it's a phenomenal story. It started off with an absolute bang. We move on to The Soldier's Tale. I really don't have much to say. He has a romance, and there's some weird time shenanigans happening. The Shrike is using the girl to get to him. I don't know if the girl's real, or if it was just the Shrike the whole time. I'm not exactly sure what was happening, but it gets rather uncomfortable as he gets rather... It's not very romantic. It just feels rather sexual. It's just a lot of descriptions of sex. He's constantly having sex with her. And at one point, it's like she's actually a machine or something, and he's sticking his penis into something, and it's just a whole bunch of things where I didn't really feel this romance that was supposed to be there. They clearly had sex a lot, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're in love, and I just did not feel that portion of it. I don't think that Dan Simmons really wrote this romance well. But that is the thing. We move on to The Poet's Tale, which is my favorite tale of the whole bunch, because it's just written the best. It really, really flexes his writing talent here, even though a lot of the words in this particular section are cuss words. But he is an aristocrat. He went to cryosleep and damaged his brain, so he has to relearn things, and he only knows specific words like cuss words. But in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was the word processor. I love that. It was fun. And part of the issue is he wants to get these books that he eventually writes published. I feel like this is a bit of meta commentary on Dan Simmons himself, probably. But he wants to publish these things, and it's got a lot of artistic integrity, but it's not going to sell well. She says it won't sell well. I mean, you can sell them. They're not going to sell well. One, people don't really read anymore, which rings really true in 2025, let alone 27th century. And also, your book is just, yeah, it's good, but no one is going to want to read it. It's not genre fiction. It's not this. Like, no one's going to care. But actually, it ends up becoming a super popular book, and he doesn't want to write a sequel, and it just becomes it's just so much fun. I really don't want to tell you too much about it. Yeah, even if we're in the spoiler section, like, you really just read it again. If you've already read this book, then read it again. That part's like the best part of the book. So, Yeah, I love the Poe's Tale. Then we get the Scholar's Tale. His wife, Soraya, is 27. Sol himself is 29. I am 24. It's crazy to me to think that in 3 years I could be Soraya with a kid. I'm not, but I guess I really am becoming an adult, huh? We have Rachel, their child. And she's super talented, super smart girl from the get-go. And she's grown up to be a fine young woman. There's at some point, she has a conversation with her dad, who is a Jewish man. She says, "Dad, do you believe in God?" And he responds honestly, "I'm waiting to." Rachel goes to college, does all this stuff. She finds a man that she probably will get engaged to. But she becomes an archaeologist. Top of her class, super smart. She goes to those time tunes that we've heard so much about throughout the story. And something strange happens this one time, with her and seemingly her alone. She gets an affliction that no one else in the galaxy seems to have except for her. She is now aging backwards. Every day she goes to bed, she forgets a little bit of the present. And she physically begins to age backwards. I wrote Rachel wishes not to have 51st dates. So for the first couple years, she would, her at her most fullest brain capacity, where she understood everything that was going on, she wrote down video journals to explain, to update herself and to update her new self on everything. She would have a video ready to go, like, here's what happened to you, here's what's been happening since it happened to you, da-da-da-da-da, you're caught up now. But she said as it's becoming too much, as she gets younger and younger, that's just going to be a stranger to her. It's not her anymore as she reverts back. So why make her suffer what her other self had to suffer? And remember. So eventually they stop. I say 51st dates because that is a more positive version of a similar thing. I mean, it's not a similar thing in terms of aging backwards, but the whole plot of 51st Dates with Adam Sandler is that the Drew Barrymore's character, she has no memory past this certain point. So every day, she won't remember the day that she just had. So, but Adam Sandler falls in love with her, and so they make it work where he leaves a video for her every single day, so that they're all caught up, you know. And the movie ends with her and 3 kids and a husband that by the time she falls asleep, she won't remember ever existed until she watches that video again, which must be a lot for someone to take in. But Rachel chooses not to deal with that. There are a lot of parallels because of Saul being a Jewish man of Abraham and Isaac. Seemingly the Shrike or something else is telling him he needs to take his daughter to be sacrificed on Hyperion. And there's a lot of argument scenes he seemingly has with God in terms of why would you do this to Isaac? Why would you make Abraham have to do this? There's a part I found really interesting where he says define innocence, or some distant voices define innocence, because he said, I will never love God because he allowed, or would even, it's not even, he understands intellectually that the story is not saying that you should kill your kid. It's just about devotion to your God. So Abraham was willing to kill his child. His counter is, if you have to, sure, God didn't actually want him to kill his kid, but he wanted Abraham to be willing to do it. And if Abraham's willing to do that to his kid for the sake of his God, then that's not something that I want to follow. To kill something innocent. The retort by this, is it God? Is it his self? Is his own conscience? Is it the Shrike? I don't know, but the disembodied voice in his head goes, define innocence. Are not there adults who are innocent? Who is truly innocent? Who are you to decide? Maybe Abraham's true challenge should have been to offer himself instead. Interesting things. Regardless of your spiritual perspective, I think it's just interesting to think about. As the years go by, and the years go by, and the years go by, and Rachel gets younger and younger and younger, she's now a child again. Her bone mass has made her turn back into a literal kid. Like we're reversing time. Soraya wants to go on a trip, but she's been so focused on her husband and her kid, she's not taken the time. But she is convinced her husband to go. And as she goes on that trip, an accident happens and she dies. So now they must go to her funeral, and every day Sol must explain that to his daughter, who's aging backwards, that your mom is dead. And at some point she gets so much younger, and he gets so tired of telling it, that he just starts telling her she's on a trip, and she'll be back eventually. Easier that way. Until we get caught up with the ever-present, which is that she's now a baby. She's reverted all the way back. She's lost her hair. She has no more teeth. She is an infant again in his arms, and he's going to Hyperion for this. What exactly happens? Well, the story ends a bit abruptly. But that's why he's there. The detective tale, I really don't have too much to add. I mean, there is an AI based on John Keats, which I think is really funny. She's also pregnant, which I guess is important. With the Constance tale, I actually didn't write anything for his tale. Yeah. But, ultimately, they make it to Hyperion, and then the story just kind of closes really fast. So if I'm going to know what happens, I kind of have to read The Fall of Hyperion. But again, it's not really about the destination. If you're looking for, well, how's that ending, you're going to be extremely disappointed. And I can see why people might be upset with that. But it's not really about that. It's about the themes, the thematic elements, what it's trying to say to you, the ideas, and the characters themselves. That's why you're here, not for the end game. So if you can deal with that, I think you'll find a lot to enjoy here. Overall, it's been it, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Showing episode 10, and I'll see you next time, as I think we're finally going to finish the Dune saga with Sandworms of Doom and Sandworms of Dune and Hunters of Dune by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, and then we will, I will, for the first time for the YouTube channel, reread for me Fellowship of the Ring, along with reading The Fall of Hyperion. For Sunday's slot, anyway. That's the plan. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Maybe some comics in between that as well. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.